If you could say something to President Trump and he was going to hear you right now, what would it be?
You're a worthless pile of
And you voted for him how many times?
3 times. That was my bad. Apparently, I'm an idiot.
There are conflicting claims about the talks to end the war with Iran. Iran launching new strikes overnight, insisting no negotiations are taking place.
Meantime, President Trump is facing a backlash on Capitol Hill, with some Republicans now demanding answers about the war. ABC's Sophie Fillet has details.
This morning, some Republicans venting their frustration with the Trump administration after a classified briefing on the war in Iran. They claim Pentagon officials would not provide details on when or how ground troops might be used and what the war has cost so far. Our Rachel Scott is on Capitol Hill.
The top Republican on the House Armed Services Committee telling reporters we want to know more about what's going on, what the options are, and why they're being considered, saying we're just not getting enough answers to those questions.
Hi buddies, Adam is here. So what just happened? The most significant political shift yet. It's not Democrats, not the media, not the establishment turning on Trump. It's his own base. The people who survived every scandal, every impeachment, every investigation with him. They're done. And they're calling for his removal. This is the nightmare scenario Trump never thought he'd face.
We all know you were a longtime loyal supporter of President Trump, but you broke with him in part because you felt he was too focused on foreign affairs rather than the America First promises he made on the campaign trail. As we enter day 17 of the Iran war, do you believe the president's voters can trust him?
Well, just to be clear, the president broke with me over the Epstein files. So that always has to be said. He called me a traitor because I stood with women who were raped when they were 14 and 16. But I do completely disagree where the president has led the country. You know what? It makes absolutely no sense, Pamela, going into midterm elections. Let's remove Donald Trump out of it. Let's just put any president in there. Why would an American president lead his political party into the midterms, waging a full-scale major war, completely unprovoked on Iran, on behalf of Israel? And that's the way most Americans see it. They see this is for Israel, not for America.
His entire political power structure is built on that base. That base got him elected. That base kept him in power. That base was supposed to be the unbreakable shield that protected him from any consequence. But now that shield is cracking. Now those same people are saying, we're not going to protect you anymore. You broke your promise. You betrayed us. And now you have to face the consequences.
Let's take a listen to one more woman who we spoke with. If you could say something to President Trump and he was going to hear you right now, what would it be?
You're a worthless pile of
And you voted for him how many times?
3 times. That was my bad. Apparently, I'm an idiot.
This isn't some fringe group of disgruntled never-Trumpers. These are the hardcore supporters who've been with him through everything. These are the voices that shaped the MAGA movement. These are the people who built the narrative that Trump was different, that Trump was anti-war, that Trump would end the forever wars and put America first. And now they feel betrayed in a way that cuts to the very core of why they supported him in the first place.
Everybody has to get out there. Every way possible. They have to get out there. This is it. This is our country. You know, I want my country back. I don't want everybody going around with their the MAGA with the American flags like they're the only ones. We are the Americans too, and I think there are more of us. No, I don't think, I know there are more of us because we believe in what's right and wrong, empathy, kindness, bringing the country together, not dispersing it.
Let me take you inside exactly what's happening, because this is one of the most significant political developments of the entire second term, and most people are missing just how seismic the shift really is. So what actually triggered this meltdown? Trump authorized military strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. No congressional approval, no debate, no consultation with the legislative branch. He just did it. He ordered the strikes and let Congress find out about it afterward, like it was an afterthought. Like the constitutional requirement for congressional authorization was just a suggestion that didn't apply to him.
President Trump's former national security advisor, Ambassador John Bolton, and thank you for being here. I mean, as someone who obviously used to spend a lot of time inside the Situation Room with the president, When you hear what he says there, do you believe it matters what the president calls this?
Well, I think he's been looking for some time for a way to get out of this. And although it started as a regime change operation, which I think was the right objective, I think he's been nervous about the outcome for some time. It's not unusual for presidents to try and disguise what's actually going on. Let's not forget, Harry Truman called the war in Korea a police exercise, a police operation. But I think it shows that Trump is confused about what his objectives are, and that doesn't bode well.
I mean, the White House says it's been very clear what their objectives are. You don't think it is?
Well, how many have they named over the course of the last 3+ weeks? I think the correct objective is to overthrow the regime. I don't think it's going to negotiate with any seriousness at all. I don't think that's what they want, and I don't think that there's anybody in this regime with whom we can negotiate. If we weren't prepared to stick this out, then I don't think the president ever should have started it.
Now, you have to understand what Trump promised his supporters to fully grasp why this betrayal cuts so deep. His entire foreign policy brand was built on one central promise: no new wars. He said other presidents got us bogged down in endless military conflicts in the Middle East. He said they wasted trillions of dollars and got thousands of American soldiers killed for nothing. He said we should have stayed out of Iraq, out of Syria, out of Afghanistan. And he said, if you elect me, I will be different. I will not get us into new wars. I will bring the troops home. I will stop wasting money on foreign adventures. I will put America first. That was the pitch. That was the deal. That was why anti-war Republicans, libertarians, independents, people sick of military conflicts rallied behind him. He wasn't just the candidate for tax cuts or deregulation, he was the peace candidate. He was the guy who would break the cycle of endless military intervention that had defined American foreign policy for decades. And for the most part, during his first term, he actually delivered on that promise. He didn't start any major new wars. He reduced military involvement in certain regions. He became known as an anti-war Republican, which is almost unheard of in a party traditionally defined by hawkish foreign policy. His supporters loved him for that. They defended him against critics who called him a warmonger. They said, "No, you don't understand. Trump is different. Trump is going to change things." So when he authorized those Iran strikes without congressional approval, he didn't just violate a campaign promise. He violated the foundational ideological principle that his movement was built on. He became exactly what he said he was fighting against. He became a war hawk. He became an establishment Republican waging military conflict in the Middle East without congressional oversight. He became the swamp, and his supporters felt it, not just disappointed, betrayed. The first major voice to break ranks was Dave Smith. Now, if you're not deep into the MAGA media ecosystem, you might not know who Dave Smith is, but within that world, he's a major figure. He's a podcaster with millions of followers. He's been part of the MAGA media infrastructure for years. He's one of the voices that helped build the narrative that Trump was the anti-war candidate. He promoted that message to his audience. He defended Trump against accusations of being a warmonger. He said, "No, you don't understand. Trump is different." And then Trump did the exact opposite of everything Dave Smith had been telling his audience. So Dave Smith came out and said something that sent shockwaves through the MAGA world. He called for Trump's impeachment. He said the Iran strikes violated constitutional war powers. He said they violated the anti-war principles the MAGA movement was supposed to stand for. He said Trump had become the swamp. He said Trump had become everything they said they were fighting against. And then he said the words that Trump never thought he'd hear from one of his own: impeach him. Do you understand how significant that is? This isn't some anonymous Twitter account. This isn't a disgruntled former staffer. This is a prominent media figure with millions of followers who has been supportive of Trump for years. And he's standing in front of that audience and saying the person they've been defending needs to be removed from office. And Dave Smith wasn't alone. Once that door opened, others walked through it. Tucker Carlson started criticizing the strikes. Megyn Kelly started criticizing the strikes. Other major media figures in the conservative ecosystem started saying the same thing. This is a betrayal. This is unconstitutional. This is exactly what we said we were fighting against. Why are we protecting Trump when he's become the thing we opposed? Video titles started popping up all over YouTube. MAGA is calling for impeachment. Trump betrays isolationist base. Impeachment backfires on Trump as supporters demand removal. Millions of views. Millions of people watching content that basically said Trump's own supporters are turning on him, and the messaging was unmistakable. This isn't about partisan politics anymore. This is about accountability within the movement itself. Now let's talk about why this is so much more dangerous for Trump than any Democratic-led impeachment effort could ever be. When Democrats were calling for impeachment, it was predictable. It was partisan. It was the opposing party trying to take down the president. Republican politicians could dismiss it as political theater. They could rally around Trump and say, "This is just the Democrats trying to undo the election." Their base would back them up because the base saw it the same way. But when Trump's own supporters are calling for impeachment, that narrative collapses. Republican politicians can't dismiss it as partisan politics when it's coming from their own voters. They can't rally the base to defend Trump when the base itself is divided. They can't say, "This is just Democrats," when Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly are saying the same thing. This creates a dynamic that Trump has never had to face before. His base wants him removed, but his party is protecting him. That's an unstable situation that can't last. Because sooner or later, those Republican politicians are going to look at their own voters and ask themselves, who am I really protecting here? Am I protecting Trump, or am I protecting my own political future? And here's the part that should terrify Trump. If enough of his own supporters keep calling for impeachment, it gives Republican senators permission to vote to convict without looking like they're just doing what Democrats want. They can point to the base and say, look, even Trump supporters are demanding accountability. Look, the MAGA movement itself is fractured on this. So why should we be more loyal to Trump than his own voters are? That's the nightmare scenario. That's the scenario where removal actually becomes possible. Because the only thing that's protected Trump through 2 impeachments is the lockstep loyalty of his party. And that lockstep loyalty is built on the assumption that the base will punish any Republican who votes against Trump. But if the base is calling for impeachment themselves, that assumption falls apart. Trump saw this coming. He warned House Republicans about it back in January. He told them, look, you got to win the midterms because if we don't win the midterms, they're going to find a reason to impeach me. He knew that if Democrats took the House, they would use impeachment as a political weapon. He understood that threat, but what he didn't anticipate was that his own base would turn on him before the midterms even happened. He didn't anticipate that the coalition he built would fracture from within before the opposition even had a chance to strike. He thought the base would always be loyal. He thought they'd defend him no matter what he did. He thought he could count on that automatic loyalty that had protected him through every scandal, every investigation, every controversy. But he was wrong, because the base has limits, and when you violate the core promise that brought them to you in the first place, those limits get tested. And right now, those limits are shattering. Let me give you 6 clear points that capture exactly why this is such a seismic shift and why Trump is panicking. First, Trump's invincibility within the Republican Party is gone. For years, he's been able to count on automatic loyalty from his base and from most Republicans in Congress. If Trump said something, his supporters defended it. If Trump wanted something, Republicans voted for it. If Trump faced criticism, his base rallied around him. He was politically untouchable. He could do almost anything, and his supporters would still back him. But that's changing. Now his own supporters are calling for his removal. Now his own base is saying, we're not going to defend you anymore. And that changes how politicians relate to Trump. It changes how they calculate political risk. Because if the base is fractured, Republican politicians don't have to worry as much about primary challenges if they vote against him. They have more freedom to vote their conscience. Second, the midterm elections just got a lot more complicated for Republicans. They were counting on Trump's popularity and base enthusiasm to drive turnout. They were counting on his supporters showing up to vote for Republican candidates. But if the base is demoralized, if they feel betrayed, if they're angry at Trump, they might stay home. They might sit out the election, and that would be devastating for Republicans. That would cost them seats in competitive races. That would hurt them in districts where they need every vote. So now, Republicans have to worry about Trump depressing turnout among his own supporters right before the most important election of his presidency. Third, this creates an opening for a third impeachment that didn't exist before. When Democrats were calling for impeachment, it was partisan politics. It was the opposing party trying to take down the president. But when Trump's own supporters are calling for impeachment, that's different. That's not partisan anymore. That's accountability. That's even the base saying, we want this. And that changes how Senate Republicans can justify voting to convict. They can point to his own base and say, even Trump supporters want him removed. The MAGA movement itself is divided on this. Why should we be more loyal to Trump than his own voters are? Fourth, the economic consequences of the Iran strikes are making everything worse. Military escalation spiking oil prices. Oil prices spiking, creating inflation pressure. Inflation pressure making Trump's economic promises look hollow. He said he would fix the economy. He said he would bring inflation down. He said he would make America prosperous again. But his own actions are undermining those promises. The base notices that. The base cares about their pocketbooks. They care about gas prices and grocery prices and rent. And when Trump's policies make those things worse, they get angry. They start questioning whether he really has their back. Fifth, the Iran strikes are undermining everything the MAGA movement claimed to stand for. The movement was built on being anti-establishment. It was built on being against the swamp. It was built on being against forever wars. But Trump just authorized military intervention in the Middle East without congressional approval. He just used executive power in exactly the way MAGA supporters always complained about when establishment politicians did it. He became the swamp, he became the establishment, he became exactly what the movement opposed, and the base is noticing. Sixth, and this is the most important point, the third impeachment is becoming possible. There have already been 2 impeachments of Trump. The first was over the Ukraine phone call. The second was over January 6th. Both times he survived because his party protected him. But now we're looking at a potential third impeachment over war powers violations. And this time it might actually succeed because his own base is turning on him. This time there might be enough Republican votes to convict because even Trump supporters are calling for it. This time removal might actually happen because the political calculation has changed. And if Trump gets removed, everything changes. J.D. Vance becomes president. The Republican Party fractures even more. Legal battles and constitutional questions reshape American politics in ways we can't even predict. Here's what we need to watch as this story continues to develop. The key question is whether the fracture in the base deepens or heals. If more prominent MAGA voices continue calling for impeachment, if the pressure from the base continues building, Republican politicians are going to start calculating their own survival. And when politicians start calculating survival, loyalty to Trump becomes a liability rather than an asset. We're also watching whether the Iran strikes lead to further escalation. If there's retaliation, if American casualties happen, if the situation spirals into something bigger, the pressure on Trump will intensify dramatically. The base that was promised no new wars will see exactly what they were promised would never happen, happening in real time. And we're watching the response from congressional Republicans. Are they going to continue protecting Trump even as his own base turns on him? Or are they going to start signaling that they hear the concerns from their voters? The first cracks in that wall of protection will tell us everything about whether removal is actually possible. Here's the bottom line on everything we've covered. Trump authorized military strikes on Iranian nuclear sites without congressional approval. No debate, no consultation, just unilateral military action that violated his most fundamental campaign promise. The promise of no new wars. The promise that brought anti-war Republicans, libertarians, and independents into his coalition. The promise that was the foundation of his entire foreign policy brand. His base feels betrayed. Not just disappointed, betrayed. Because he became exactly what he said he was fighting against. A war hawk. an establishment Republican waging military conflict without congressional oversight, the swamp. Prominent MAGA voices started breaking ranks. Dave Smith, a podcaster with millions of followers who helped build the anti-war narrative around Trump, called for impeachment. Tucker Carlson criticized the strikes. Megyn Kelly criticized the strikes. Video titles went viral. MAGA is calling for impeachment. Trump betrays isolationist base. Millions of views. Millions of people seeing that Trump's own supporters are turning on him. This changes everything. It's not partisan politics anymore. It's accountability from within the movement. It gives Republican senators permission to vote to convict without looking like they're doing what Democrats want. It fractures the base right before the midterms, threatening turnout in critical races. It opens the door for a third impeachment that could actually succeed. Trump warned House Republicans back in January that they had to win the midterms or Democrats would impeach him, but he never anticipated his own base would turn on him before the midterms even happened. He thought the loyalty was automatic. He thought the shield would hold. He was wrong. The base has limits, and Trump just found them. Stay tuned. The fracture is deepening. The calls for impeachment are growing. The political calculus is shifting in real time. And we're going to be right here covering every single development as it unfolds.